a singing his song. All the little birds on Jaybird Street love to hear the robin go tweet, 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 rockin' robin, tweet.
Welcome to Life is Good. I'm Heather McHugh, your ever-loving hostess, and guess where we are today? We are at
Lakeview Aviation at Newport Airport. The airport's officially known as Northeast Kingdom International.
Yes, and I used to fly in here when I was a teenager and young lady, and now I'm not a teenager or a young lady, but I love this airport. And it's a jewel in our area, and it has a lot to say. And we have a lot to do to improve it, to make it more amenable.
Yeah, it is a jewel. When you see it from the air, some of the pictures that are even on our website for the airport, when you see the pictures of it with the green grass and the two runways crossing, it's absolutely stunning. The lake on the side, the mountains in the background. It's a place that you almost can't believe it's so perfect.
I can believe that because I
Yeah.
used to fly in here, but I didn't know what I was looking at back then. I just knew that I loved it.
Yeah, yeah.
And the thing about flying back then and flying now is how much has it changed in the last 50, 40 years?
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot.
Well, flying is flying. I mean, little airports like this dot the landscape across the whole country. By far, they outnumber the large commercial airports where people are most familiar with flying into O'Hare or Los Angeles,
JFK.
Or Logan, JFK. I mean, that's what most people think of when they think of airports, but there are thousands of these small airports that go across the country, and they're all managed differently.
Yes,
all
they are.
different ways to manage these things, but you can fly across the country and never land at a big airport very easily. You could probably fly across the country and land on nothing but grass or dirt still today. Yeah, it's different than what most people think of aviation being so restricted, and they're stunned to know that you can fly an airplane and not have a radio if you don't want to. You can just fly around.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, you don't have to have a radio. However, my father, at one point when he used to fly on business and he was on his way somewhere in Canada, and he lost communication and he flew over restricted airspace.
Not a good thing.
And so two Voodoo jets accompanied him to the airport, at which point they landed him and took him in and were most entertained by my father as they tore apart the airplane.
Yeah, that's an experience I don't share with him.
No, he liked to tell that story. What was your first involvement with aviation?
Officially, the first thing, I started taking lessons in the early 80s. That was the first thing. But when I look back on my life, there were times that I was involved with aviation in different ways. Friends had a plane, a friend's father had a plane. We'd fly to Winnipesaukee from where I grew up in upstate New York. One of the first jobs I had, I found myself working in Southeast Asia, and I flew on a DC-3.
Oh, I thought you said one of my first jobs, I was flipping burgers in Southeast Asia. What were you doing there?
Well, to the extent I can tell you what we were doing there, it was involved with navigation. It was a navigation system that was a military navigation system, and it had the side benefit of you could use it for oil exploration too, in and around the South China Sea.
Were you military or were you working
No, I
for
was
an oil
always a
company?
civilian, but
Working for an oil company?
yeah, both. Yeah,
Oh, well, we won't go there
yeah,
at all.
yeah.
But it's really hard to frack in the ocean, isn't it?
It's very deep. It's very deep.
I know.
So, but to answer your question, I found that aviation ran kind of through my life, even though I wasn't directly involved in it. And then I found myself living really close to one of these, much smaller than this airport, called Minuteman in Stowe, Massachusetts.
Stowe, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Oh, they have a high golden town for taxes there too. That's
Yeah,
nice.
they do. And so, since I was so close, I thought, well, I'll take lessons, and that's what started it, and I just never stopped. I found how much fun it was, and I kept going, ended up getting a private license and moving on up the chain that way.
Instrument
Light,
rating,
commercial rating, and then...
multi-engine?
No, I never did that.
That's too bad, because if you fly with one, you'll be up there all night.
Yeah, no, I've never done a multi-engine, but I started adding little pieces like tail wheel endorsements.
Oh, Cub, Piper Cub.
Yeah, well, and that's, so I own a plane that has a tail wheel now.
What is it?
It's called a Starduster. So if you ever see a blue and orange plane flying around the lake in Newport and around it, that's me.
How about amphibian?
No, but the person that runs the FBO here is building an amphibious plane, and one of the people in the hangar down the way here has I think it's a 172 on floats.
172 on floats?
Yeah. So
We flew a 180 or 182 on floats.
Mm-hmm.
and Dad would land at Newport.
182, probably.
182.
Yeah.
He'd land at Newport if the lake was rough,
Yeah.
or he'd land in front of the cottage. Everybody flew in those days. It was very affordable back then. It was not a status symbol by any means. It was a practical way to get around if you had places that you had to be.
Well, people think of flying as being really expensive. And as hobbies goes, I don't think it's at the top of the list. You can do it at a top, high, expensive level, but an F-150 costs more than what most people spend on their airplanes around here.
What's an F-150?
An F-150 truck.
A truck. Okay, I knew you can't be talking about a plane.
No, not a fighter plane. No, an F-150, a Ford or, a
Really?
Chevy Silverado, those are far more expensive than the average cost of a single-engine airplane.
People
at
have
this
different
airport.
priorities. It's like, I
Oh,
want to go to
sure.
Walmart, so I'm going to take my car. Oh, never mind, I'm going to take my Piper. It's like Walmart is so inconsiderate. They do not.
No,
They do not
you
have a
can-
runway.
You can sleep there, but you can't land there.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Other things we can talk about. Now, you said DC3, and I've got a little note here because there's things I didn't want to miss. Why did you choose Vermont?
I've always wanted to live in Vermont ever
For sure?
since. I'm walking advertisement. Ever since I was a youngster. And it just was the culmination when I got to the point where I could live wherever I wanted to and still work at a job that I liked. I'm an engineer, so it was a little constrained in that regard. But eventually in my career, I got to the point where I could live wherever I wanted to. And so we moved to Vermont. The whole family moved here in around 2004. And I wish I'd done it 10 years earlier.
Everybody who moves here say, I wish I'd done it earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. Put me in that category.
My present house is 10 miles away from the cottage at which on Lake Memphremagog where I grew up, so I'm home.
Yeah.
I was across the line, but I've traveled all over, I've lived everywhere, but I'm home.
That's it.
And I just had a guest this afternoon, and I told her, I said, I have no wanderlust at all. I just don't want to go anywhere.
Mm.
And that's something else.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're that content. And it's
Yeah.
not just the age thing. I'm really happy here. And people who move to this area, you can come by plane now. People love it, but it's nice to have access to a situation like this, an aviation place where you can take lessons, you go up for an hour with an instructor and see the area. And, I mean, it's worth seeing, it's worth doing, and it's worth learning. And there are so many children around here who want to become aviators.
That's a good thing. That's one of the things that we try to do as much as possible is to connect this airport to the community, whether it's through STEM initiative, science, technology,
Engineering?
and
Okay, yeah.
and
I interrupted you, STEM.
yeah, STEM, that curriculum is pretty well developed and it connects very directly to aviation. So bringing that to the high school is something that an organization, flying is acronym soup, really. The EAA.
I know.
The EAA.
Tell me about the EAA.
The experimental aviation,
The aircraft, experimental aircraft.
Yeah, these are people who
Think
build.
John Denver.
Well,
I
yeah.
don't think John Denver.
So these are people who build their own aircrafts. In fact, the one that I mentioned, the Starduster, was built in 1973 by a pharmacist. He built it himself, put it together, put fabric over the wings, an engine in the front, and that plane is still flying today. 1973 to today. Different engine, but same plane. Same fabric, same wings, same structure, same tubing.
Who was
everything.
it? Do you know his name?
Tom Overton was
Local?
his name.
Was he from here?
No, he's from Montana. He
Fantastic.
built the plane in Montana, and it's a little. The colors of the plane are this blue and orange, which I never fully understood till I was reading an article about Tom Overton in an old journal that I got when I bought the plane. The fellows who sold it to me gave me a box of junk that went with it.
Yeah.
This was some of the elements in the junk. Tom was a pharmacist, and his biggest line of products in his pharmacy was the Rexall product line.
Of course.
And if you picture the Rexall logos, blue and orange.
I can actually see that in my head.
Exactly. So now in my hangar I have a sign, a Rexall sign that's blue and orange right next to the airplane.
This explains it all. Don't
Yeah.
ask me any questions.
Correct, yeah. So
All
that's
right.
the way it goes.
That's what about, and we're talking about acronyms. I have a few here for you.
Oh, there's a bunch.
Let's see. Of course, I can't see it because I'm not wearing my glasses. Let's start with the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration.
Yeah, there's some big organizations, but that's at the top of the food chain.
And I love it.
Yeah, they're the ones that are single-handedly responsible for I'll just say 90% of the investment at airports like this, even though this is a state-owned airport, they get their funding to build runways and add extensions to the runways, put a taxiway along the side of the runways, put instrument approaches into those airports. That's all managed by the FAA. So they'll put the lion's share of the money in, and the state, in the case of this airport, would put in some amount of money to go with it.
So we don't have to fully match it?
Not at all.
Okay, what are we looking for here? What would this airport benefit by getting soon?
This airport, and generally this is true of almost every airport in Vermont. There's some things that are really in common. The issues of building hangars are common across all the state-owned airports. And the northern border for us, this is just our airport, needs customs would be a huge improvement here.
Apparently you're talking to those people though, and that they're not against it. Who is against it and who's stopping it?
It seems as though whenever it bubbles up, that the resources are available, but it never gets past some level that is in the Boston area. So Boston oversees this part of the Customs and Border Protection, and it never gets past that level. So we've got a problem. There's no reason with the other states in New England, Maine, New Hampshire, there's a black hole where Vermont is, and then New York, all have customs service for the border airports that you come in. This airport used to have that.
I know.
Before 9/11. I understand why things changed a little bit then, but all these other places have reverted back to a normal way of doing business. And in fact, the most common exchange would be through Canada. So we're talking mostly about pilots coming from Canada or going to Canada. There was an agreement between Canada and the United States at the federal level to implement a very seamless, easy way of crossing the border. So if I wanted to go to Canada, I simply make a phone call and I can land at almost any airport in Canada. Not quite any airport, but almost any airport. And with a phone call when I land, I just call, I say I'm here. 99% of the time they'll just give you a number, you write it in your log, and they say go on your way. Once in a while they reserve the right to say stay put, we're going to come out and see what you're bringing, what you've got in the plane, what the plane says. Okay, that's fair enough.
Why do you think the black hole is in Vermont?
That was a one-way street.
Yeah.
The Canadians implemented this. The United States didn't. So the United States Customs never got to that point. That quick entry thing never really happened. Then 9/11 came along, and that kind of took us out of the game plan for a while. Other states then resurrected their ability to cross the border in a reasonable way. Vermont has not. So if you want to fly from this airport, if we want to go visit our friend who lives 20 miles on the other side of the border, has a beautiful grass runway,
Oh,
George. So you can't do that very easily. We'd have to go to Sherbrooke, clear into Canada at Sherbrooke. That's not a big deal. George's place is a couple of miles from Sherbrooke, land there. But when I want to come back to the United States, I have to fly past this airport, over the Green Mountains to Burlington, clear customs, fly back over the Green Mountains, and then come here. So to go 20 miles back and forth, I have to fly, it's about 120 miles of flying to do that. And it makes no sense whatsoever.
No sense at all.
We have customs at the highway up here, we have customs at the boat launch in town on the lake, we have customs over in Troy. It's a 10-minute ride for these folks.
Well, that's so impractical. Who do you talk to? You say it stops at Boston, but why? And
I can't.
who can we put some plastic explosives under their seat? Oh, I didn't say that, but to charge them up a little bit to get their attention, because this is ridiculous.
It is, and it gets hidden under a layer of bureaucracy that's just impenetrable from my point of view as
to the plastic explosives.
As an engineer, it just seems ridiculous. But we've tried to, when we're talking about a customs facility here, they wanted a 3,000 square foot building with, secured windows and secured doorways and a place to keep people who are being put in, being held.
Yeah.
It was, and it would have cost many millions of dollars to build a building like that. There is no,
What we have to do is just put a yurt out there.
Yeah.
Just a yurt. I don't think I've introduced this man to you. This is Scott Winick. Tell us, Sorry, I'm the worst hostess, and you all know that if you watch the show regularly, but it's not all about me. It's about Scott Winick tonight. Thank you so much for your patience with me. But I don't like bureaucracy at any level.
So customs has been a real problem to bring that. That single thing alone would bring more traffic. And in fact, just we had, I say we because I feel very vested in this airport, but there was Michelin was flying a jet in here.
Yes.
The runways have been extended long enough that they're large enough for large jets to fly in here, not 747s, but big jets can
We
fly
had
in
big jets during the eclipse, 2 of them.
Absolutely, that's a perfect size. They're
Yeah.
they're bigger than even executive jets, but yeah. So, but Michelin has stopped flying in here because not that they can get jet fuel, runway's long enough, beautiful approach coming in. The reason they were coming here was because it was easier for Michelin to bring the people across the border in a car than fly them into Canada and arrange for customs over there. But this is another thing that you asked what could be done at the airport, so I listed customs first. The approach to the runways is another issue. So when an airplane comes in here, there's an approach to runway 36, that's going north. So there's an approach to that runway. There's not an approach coming south on that runway. So if
Would there ever be?
It's all been done, it's been mapped out, it's been flown, the geolocations have been done, the thresholds in the planar penetrations of the mountains and the trees has been mapped, it's ready. It hasn't been implemented yet. For some reason, the fact that Owl's Head is there seemed to surprise the FAA when they went to implement this. Now, Owl's Head's not new, but
My mother climbed it when she graduated from high school.
so it's at least that old.
Yes.
Yeah, so the FAA somehow, that caused a problem, so maybe they can't be quite as much of a precision approach coming from the north, but there can be an approach with just lateral guidance, not vertical guidance, and it'll fit that criteria. So without that approach though, if the winds are strong in one direction or another, the plane has to land into the wind. And if it favors landing on 1-8, the plane has to come down through the clouds on 3-6, approaching 3-6.
And then crap.
Circle around low to the ground below whatever clouds there are visually, circle around and line up and then land on 1-8, coming in the other way. That circling maneuver is very dangerous. You're low, you're below the clouds, you're slow, and many companies...
And you might have to overshoot.
You might not get in. I mean,
Yeah.
if you lose visual sight of the runway at any point during that, you have to go back up into the clouds, go back down to where you started from, which
Been
is
there.
right over Lowell, and start over again. And in a jet that's going 250 knots, making a tight circle around this airport would be very easy to lose sight of the airport in the winter when the clouds are low, or hit something even worse. So without that approach coming the other way, Michelin decided they can't come here any longer. So there's another, it's a business proposition that these airports, they're not just for knuckleheads like me who just like to fly around and have fun, and I mean, we do some volunteer work. We
What do you
fly
do?
pets, and we'll fly, for Air Lifeline and
Yeah.
Patient Airlift Services and Pilots and Paws, and we'll do that stuff. But it is a business at the bottom, and there's a lot of benefit to the community and to the industry to actually have these things there. And
Definitely, and I'm going to stop you there for a minute, because having a small airport in a community in this area would be vital if we could get it to be a little more amenable to people business-wise.
yeah,
I mean, think of the businesses we could have here.
yeah.
And if we had a nice little terminal, I know that you've got the money for the terminal, it hasn't been started.
Well,
And I think that terminal looks pretty small to me.
the terminal that they've designed, that they came up with the design, is small. In fact, there's a building just on the other side of that wall over there that used to be the Parker Pie building.
Yes.
That's about 3,000 square feet. That building is 2 to 3 times larger than what they're going to build.
And it can't be
It's-
utilized?
It's going to cost 10 times what it would cost to renovate that old Parker Pie building to house customs, the FBO where Dan could work, the flight school could be over there, a decent reception area it would take 1/10 of the cost and be 3 times larger. And I want to add one more piece.
Please do.
We had it funded with private individuals here who were going to put up the first $70,000 to get that off the ground and done. And
What happened?
the state owns that building and they wouldn't let us do that. So
L'État, c'est moi.
they want to build their own building, and that was, we're going back almost 8 years now.
You know what, folks?
8 years.
That is a complete ripoff. That is so terrible to have something practical on the premises.
right there.
But the government says, no, but if you give us more money, we can make something that would be better. Come on, guys, we're in Vermont. I mean, if you're listening out there in politician land, smarten up. That's practical.
It is.
I do everything in my business is by barter. I have a sliding scale. If you've got something and you've got something that needs fixing or we can exchange, we'll do it. Money isn't the only way here. So quit looking at yourselves and say, we want to make money here. How about doing a favor and using your common sense, Mr. and Mrs. Politician? I am a little ticked off right now.
Yep. Do you see that beautiful sign when you pulled in that says Lakeview Aviation?
Yes, I do.
When you come in? We built that. We made that. Dan, he paid for most of it out of his own pocket.
That's what we do here.
I just provided the labor, dug the holes, stood the thing up. We built it.
Yeah, I'm sorry to get political, folks, but it really ticks me
it's
off when I see
frustrating.
something frustrating like that. And
It is frustrating.
when you went to talk to the Supreme Court, what were you asking before they interrupted you 5 times? They have 15 minutes to talk. And Scott got up to give his request and to make his speech. And the Supreme Court justices, who are really brilliant, started to pepper him with questions immediately, so you lost your 15 minutes of
No,
presentation.
that was what they were there for. They were there to grill me on why I thought the appeal that we started in 2019.
For this
So-
building?
No, that wasn't about that. This, the hangars all over the state the hangars all over these state airports are built on state land. So it's a little complicated, but individuals own the hangar, but they lease the land underneath their hangars
Yes.
from the state. And in our particular case here, we suffered, some of the guys had increases as much as 160%
No.
overnight.
When I saw that, from what I saw online,
Yes.
that is where I really called you and said, let's do a show on this, because it seems extremely unfair and
We thought so too.
not honest.
We
And
thought so too.
So what happened here? There's a
So
little
we
gouging
started a
going on.
protest, we went through lower level courts, we went to the transportation board where we got a split decision from the transportation board. It means that one person agreed with us and 3 or 4 didn't. And so we then appealed that decision and ended up at the Superior Court in Vermont. And so it was an appeal of that decision. And
And the original was caused by an increase in taxes that was
an increase in the land lease rate.
land lease rate that was,
More than doubled. And in my case, I got the lease in 2017.
it was
It was
$419.
$490 to lease the land underneath it, and in 2019, they doubled, more than doubled it. And their justification was, well, we forgot to double it. We forgot to raise it along the way for all the people who own that hangar before you, so you're gonna pay this extra amount all of a sudden and all at once.
Is there one politician or one person that is responsible for that decision?
It's the Agency of Transportation and the division under that called VTrans, which are people who now run the aviation side of things here. And that takes us to an interesting point.
Yes.
About, it's really a tale of 2 decades. There were 10 years before 2017 where runways were built, taxiways were built, beautiful facilities were added, lighting. Airports all over Vermont benefited from that. The aeronautics division was separate from the railroads and bridges division. It was separate, so they were co-equal. There was aeronautics and then there was the other stuff. And the person who was involved in running that aeronautics division was a brilliant manager and got a lot of stuff done. It was a tremendous time. I was just beginning to be involved at the airport then, but I remember going to many of the meetings over many years and just being very impressed how things were moving forward at a good clip all the time, and that's across the state. It was
Beautiful.
a tale of 2 decades. Well, he made I don't really know what he did to get people upset, but they flushed him out. That person is gone.
Yeah.
And the next 10 years are what we've endured now. So
Is penance punishment?
aviation is now rolled underneath the bridges and potholes guys, and we're stuck at that level with people who don't understand aeronautics. I mean, it's a very different model. I mean, you think about what aviation has to deal with and what roads and bridges deal with. It's a very different model. I mean, you build a mile of road, you know exactly how far you're going to go. You're going to go a mile, then you're going to run out of road. You build a mile of runway, you can see the world.
Yes.
You can go anywhere. So it's a completely different way of looking at things in terms of resources. And the people who are running the VTrans here that's who we have the lawsuit with. And we're all done, I guess, at this point with the lawsuits. I suppose it's okay to talk about it. I don't have any more appeals, but we haven't had a decision.
No decision yet. The decision that you were looking for is, succinctly?
They'll give this back to the Board of Transportation and say, look, VTrans told you they didn't have an equation that could tell you what the increase should be, that they didn't calculate anything, that they didn't actually compute this in a reasonable way. They told you that, yet you still upheld it. Fix that problem, and that's
And make it retroactive.
It should be.
It should be. That would be wonderful. Anyway,
Anyway.
when are you expecting the decision?
Within months, within a few months. Yeah.
That's not
But
long, but it is long.
Yeah.
Some other things. The employment that would benefit this area if any businesses opened up around the airport would be great.
It'd be tremendous. I mean, there's certainly educational benefits, schools and, the technology that would be available to kids. Dan brings kids here now, but it would be a much bigger program, and that could be good. There's a section of the airport that's available for tax advantages, that you can bring things in here and not have to pay duty on them. So there's a section of the airport where you could build warehouses and have a tremendous amount of business that utilizes those warehouses for cross-border transportation.
So what's stopping that?
There are people that are trying to get that allocated. It's land mostly to the south of this building.
It blows me away that Casella can take over so much land down the road, and I had to close my windows when I went by there.
And the road is it's a dirt road.
Dirt road.
This is a
and
dirt
they go
road.
by my house in Newport, these big Casella trucks, and and they're not carrying pretty stuff, and it's from out of state a lot of times, and so it's the squeaky wheel that gets the grease, so keep squeaking.
Yeah, well, we're trying. We are. I don't believe there's been a new hangar built in Vermont in the last 8 years, because it's so difficult to work with the kinds of leases that they want to give to people who want to build, and they make it very, very difficult. In fact, the FBO, that stands for Fixed Base Operator. That's the person, the group that does flight training, perhaps has a maintenance facility for the aircraft, pumps the fuel, maintains the tanks, make sure the snow is away from this part of the airport. The state takes care of the other parts of the runways and stuff. But the FBO operator does a lot of maintenance and in and around the airport. Their contracts are so unwieldy that more than half of the airports in Vermont no longer have FBOs at them. That means you fly in and get a flat tire, you're kind of on your own. They don't have a place to get gas. They don't have someone to turn around. You're stuck.
We're going backwards in time.
Included in those lists of airports that don't have FBOs,
Burlington.
the capital. No, now Burlington's a city-owned airport.
Okay, because I thought the FBO closed there.
No, the FBO in Montpelier,
Oh.
the capital of our state, does not have an FBO contract right now. Why? Contract's that thick, and it makes no sense. You have to be able to have a long-term lease. So you run a business, you invest, you buy equipment, you build this up. The equity in that business is really the lease that you control. And if you want to sell your business, you want to sell that lease or at least pass it on. That's a huge piece of this. And that's not allowed under the lease contracts that they're promoting these days.
Wow.
So they've been trying to get businesses to take over these FBO contracts for years, and it's just not happening.
If
In fact, it's going the other way.
It looks like everybody's going backwards in aviation in Vermont, and it breaks my heart.
Vermont is well known by one of these acronym groups, AOPA, which
Oh,
is the Aircraft Owners and Pilots
I'm
Association.
COPA. Well, I'm Canadian Owners and Pilots. Yeah,
Association.
I was COPA.
So AOPA has a group of people called the Airport Support Representative, ASRs, and it's well known from the ASR reporting. I'm the ASR for this airport, but it's well known in the state that, or across the region, that Vermont is kind of a black hole at this point, and there's a problem.
You know, this is supposed to be a very optimistic show.
Oh,
And
my apologies.
no, not at all. I like to promote the area with these shows and to promote the people in this area because we have a gift of so many things here. And when I see things going backwards by bureaucracy's lack of, well, by the people who can change things, putting a stop to it, I really get frustrated, and I'm not even working here at the airport. I'm not even flying in here. I'm not even using this airport right now. But I'll tell you something, it's just hurting me so much to see the frustration level of not being able to get what it deserves, to make it a better area. It just hurts me.
The goodwill that could be engendered by just having VTrans once again looking at us as a source of partnership, as opposed to, it seems to be a turf battle every time we want to take a step in any direction. You would think that a facility like this would be a natural to have air shows, have car shows, static displays out on the ramp, food truck days.
5K races on a, what, you know.
I mean, it's just, it's a local resource that ought to be taken advantage of and connected to the community. And instead, what happens is it gets isolated because it's impossible. The first answer you always get when you want to do something like this is no. A friend of mine had a series of food truck days and static airplane displays scheduled for a year ago. New to Vermont, came with a full head of steam, started a Vermont Aviation Association. He was a very eager beaver. Yeah, he was really ready to go. Well, he gave up. He transferred it to someone else. They pulled off the first one or two food truck days, which went over very well. They were well attended. Hundreds and hundreds of people came. I mean, and then it became the state stepped in and said that they didn't want them having it. That they had to get, $2,500 insurance policies in order to do anything further like
Once
this.
again.
And it just, the bureaucracy piled up around him and he had to stop doing that. Look at what happened here with the Eclipse.
Oh my gosh, I worked it. I worked the airport.
So-
I had a blast.
Was it fun?
95 aircraft, 95 small aircraft, I believe, or 97 small aircraft, 2 jets.
Yep, all
And
came in and
they came
hundreds,
from everywhere.
500 people that we're aware of, probably more were parked and then walked in and we weren't aware of. So there was around 500 plus people here.
And they were so happy to be here, and they had a great view, and they had a food truck, and they had everything they needed here.
And you know how that was handled?
No.
Privately, locally, by the FBO manager.
Thank you, Dan McGowan.
Yep.
We're going to
He
speak
handled
with them.
everything.
And it was well
didn't
done.
require, a ponderous bureaucracy on top of it to have a great time and have everybody see the eclipse.
And the people I spoke with, and I spoke with hundreds of people at the airport, and in the little bus going back and forth, we didn't take too many people in, but those we
Oh,
did.
yeah, that's right. I heard about that.
They were wonderful, and they couldn't believe the beauty of the area.
Mm-hmm.
They would never have had any reason to fly here, but they're all wanting to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And the gentleman I interviewed yesterday morning was staying at my Airbnb. 24 years old. He's flown in here. He's his friend. They own 3 planes, or they lease 3 planes, and one of his friends flew to Dakota to an eclipse somewhere in Vermont. And when I was on the bus, somebody said, "Did you see that Dakota?" And so they were talking about this aircraft, and I'm not sure, but it might have been his friend. It's a very small world in aviation.
Might have been.
And the enthusiasm is so great. And if you get to know a pilot, you get to know aviation people. It's an open-minded group. It's a we can do anything group.
Mm-hmm.
It just blows your mind away. I was raised around people like this, and it gives you a different perspective on how to handle your life. Nothing's impossible unless the government gets involved.
Well, if anybody says, I'm going to put this contraption together, I'm going to get in it and I'm going to fly, you're pretty sure that person's pretty optimistic.
Yeah, I would say optimistic
and detail-oriented. And
Yeah.
that's the kind of people I think I like to align with. And so that's the community that I find here as well.
Yeah, and that community is strong in this airport, but with the bureaucracy not allowing it to grow, it's very frustrating, but we have to stay on a positive note here. I've got some questions here. One of them is, what specific issues or challenges? I'm not going to ask that again.
Next.
It says, if you could articulate the vision of the Northeast Kingdom Airport, what would be the first thing you'd use as a description if you had a magic wand?
A much more community, and when I say community, I mean across the border, including Sherbrooke and around all, you know, the eastern townships all the way around, and including the Northeast Kingdom, which certainly needs as much industry as it can get, something that serves that community. So it would be a much more commercially oriented airport.
Yep.
With warehousing and transportation, some sort of scheduled flights from here to some hub that gets you into the route system.
You were talking about Porter Airlines coming
Yeah,
in, you know?
yeah, something like that, that
Yeah,
either got
Cape
you
Air.
to Boston or Chicago or someplace that was a feeder route that would get you there on a scheduled basis. That would be ideal, but
It
this
would be.
community would benefit tremendously from that.
I know that a lot of people who would love to live here can't because they can't get back and forth to work.
Right, right.
And their dream is to live here.
Mm-hmm.
But if this airport was here, they could work a little remotely, but still grab an airplane and get the heck back to the office. And, oh, wouldn't that be great?
It would be, and that's what some of our private aircraft owners do for
Yeah.
themselves. We have a fellow who's a doctor, and he worked at Mass General for many, many years. He's still affiliated with them, and he has some other projects going on, but he commutes essentially from here to Manchester or from here down to Portland to meet business prospects and then also get into Mass General and still consult with them a bit. But that's only possible really because he has a plane that he bases here, and he flies himself down, and 40 minutes later he's home.
Right.
Yeah, so.
And you know, if you had
it's-
if you had your own aircraft, and you said, "Well, can't afford my own aircraft," this is another thing you can do with an aircraft. You want to go somewhere? Advertise yourself and say, "I'll take someone with me if you pay the following price," and
Sure.
so you can have it. You can
Yeah.
pretty much write it off and even. How do you know I've lived in Vermont for umpteen decades? Eh? Just to break even, you can do that,
Yeah.
and it would be so wonderful. It would help a lot of people.
It would, but that's my vision of a much more connected to the community airport, and the community being on both sides of the border.
I'd love that too.
That's my vision, and we're still working, we're still trying.
Never give up.
No,
Never give up, and I'll come back again another time, and you'll be saying, "Hey, guess what, Heather? Come on, and I'll show you the warehouses that we're building in the new hangar, and here's
and
my
I'll
new."
take you up in the Stardust.
Okay, and here's my new lease right here. It is only this big. The contract's only this thick. I took contract law. I would not like to read that contract.
No.
It's
No, it was really clear, I mean, you know, how they were, I don't wanna get.
let's not get in there.
No, no.
Anyway, this is Scott Winick, and if you come to the airport, you'll be here probably.
Mostly I'm here, yeah.
Walk
Not
around.
as much as Dan, and you might wanna talk to Dan.
I will
a
talk to
little.
Dan in a jiffy. What I wish I could do, but it's not a very nice day, is just walk you through some of the hangars to look at some of the aircraft. They've got everything here, and they're all beautiful little aircraft, and historic in some cases, and they're all very beautiful to me. There's nothing for me that is more beautiful than an aircraft. You know?
Hmm.
So thank you, Scott.
You're welcome.
I'll
It was
see
my
you
pleasure.
again.
Yeah,
And we'll
terrific.
close off. Thanks for watching Life is Good. We have another interview coming up with Dan Galvin. That might be the next show. But this one was Scott Winick. And come to the airport. It's really easy to find. Very easy to find out here in Coventry. Just type in Northeast Kingdom International, because we're optimistic, airport. And check it out. Come for a walk around. Come to take a flight up
Take
for
a
an
scenic
hour.
flight,
Yeah.
take a lesson.
Take a lesson.
I guarantee you, if you're hanging around an airport like this, someone's gonna say, what are you up to? And
You wanna
if
go
you're
out?
just hanging, you wanna go for a ride, you wanna go see the hangar, you wanna walk out and see what it's like being in an airplane, you'll get a chance.
Get a chance. Anyway, all my love, everybody. I'll see you soon. And keep voicing your opinions, folks, and maybe this will happen. See you next week.